What if I told you there are places in our national parks that you're not allowed to see? Zones so tightly restricted that even park rangers are kept in the dark, hidden behind miles of untouched wilderness. These areas are shrouded in secrecy, their purpose unknown. Some say they're protecting endangered ecosystems, but others believe they're hiding something far more sinister. What's really going on in these forbidden zones? And why does the government go to such lengths to keep them off limits? Today, we're uncovering the secrets hidden in the most remote corners of our national parks. Stay with me. What you're about to hear might change the way you see these places forever. These forbidden zones aren't marked on public maps, but they exist, hidden behind vague labels like restricted access or protected wilderness. Yet, reports from hikers, former park employees, and even whistleblowers suggest there's far more happening here than what we're told. Strange sightings, unexplainable sounds, and even mysterious disappearances have all been linked to these areas. Take, for example, the countless stories of strange, unmarked vehicles spotted deep in the wilderness. Trucks hauling massive covered cargo to places no roads should even exist. Or the eerie accounts of hikers stumbling upon fences and warning signs in the middle of nowhere, only to be quickly escorted out by armed officials, claiming it's for their own safety. What are they guarding so fiercely, and why? Some theories point to classified military projects, testing cutting-edge technology far from the public eye. Others believe these zones are used to study things even more extraordinary, biological anomalies, or even extraterrestrial activity. Could these secrets explain the bizarre phenomena reported near these areas? And here's the most chilling part. Whenever questions are raised, officials respond with silence, or worse, carefully crafted half-truths that only deepen the mystery. It begs the question, what lengths will they go to in order to protect these forbidden zones? As we dig deeper, we'll uncover real accounts and startling evidence that might just reveal what the government doesn't want you to know. Let's start with one of the most compelling cases. A former park ranger who worked in a well-known national park, whose identity remains anonymous for obvious reasons. This ranger described a section of the park that was completely off limits, not just to the public, but to most park employees as well. Let's hear his account. His voice has been altered to protect his identity.
So, during my tenure as a park ranger, I was assigned to a sector that included a restricted area known as Zone 4. Access was strictly limited. Only personnel with a high-level clearance were permitted entry. The official explanation was that it was a sensitive wildlife habitat requiring minimal human disturbance. Anyways, one evening while conducting routine patrols near the perimeter of Zone 4, I noticed an unmarked vehicle that was entering through the service gate. So obviously my curiosity was piqued, so I observed from a concealed position. Several individuals in non-standard uniforms were unloading large, sealed containers and transporting them into the restricted area. The following day, I inquired with my supervisor about the activity. I was curtly reminded that Zone 4 operations were above my pay grade, and advised to focus on my designated duties. Now, this response from my supervisor only heightened my suspicions. Over the next few months, I continued to notice unusual activities. There were these low-flying helicopters without any identification markings, unfamiliar personnel conducting late-night operations, and the installation of surveillance equipment along the Zone 4 boundary. So, we couldn't even get close to it again. Despite the official narrative of wildlife conservation, the level of security and secrecy surrounding Zone 4 suggested that something else was being concealed. Something the public and most park staff weren't meant to discover.
Now, this isn't just an isolated story. Similar reports have come from other national parks across the country. Zones with no public access, guarded facilities, and an overwhelming air of secrecy. What's strange is the consistency of these accounts. The unmarked vehicles, the mysterious equipment, and the eerie sounds that defy explanation. But it doesn't stop there. Some hikers who've accidentally wandered into these zones describe encounters with strange creatures, large, unidentifiable figures lurking in the trees or watching them from a distance. Genetic experiments, perhaps, or creatures brought here from somewhere, or something else. I was able to speak with someone who experienced something like this, and here's what he had to say.
I've told this story a few times to a couple of my friends, and they just think I'm batshit crazy, honestly. But I was hiking in a national park. I don't want to say which one it was. This was a few months ago. I'd been there a few times because I live pretty close to it. And I always go on this one trail. So I veered off this trail just a little bit, just exploring. And about 15 minutes in, I started hearing movement in the distance. At first, I just thought it was an animal, a deer, an elk, something like that. But then I caught a glimpse of something, and it was big. It was definitely bigger than any bear I've ever seen. And it was moving on two legs. But it wasn't human either. I couldn't make out its face because I just couldn't see its face. It was like stayed in the shadows. But, I mean, it had this hulking build. It was just covered in dark fur. So I'm sitting there, heart pounding, thinking like, oh crap, what is this thing? But then it just like disappears into the trees. I don't know. Maybe it was looking for food, or I have no idea. So I was on my way back to the trail, and like not even like 30 seconds later, I hear these voices, men's voices. And so I just kind of stay real still where I'm at. And I see these armed guys. There's maybe like 5 or 6 of them moving through the area. From what I could tell, they were in these uniforms, but they definitely weren't park rangers. They had rifles, and they were like talking into their walkie-talkies, but I couldn't make out everything that they were saying. I did hear one of them mention something about moving it out and securing the area, and that's when I realized I'm not supposed to be here right now. So after they cleared the area, I just went back to the main trail as fast as I could and like jogged my car as best as I could. I don't know when I saw that day, but it wasn't an animal that I've ever seen. And those men, whoever they weren't rangers. Whatever they were doing out there, they didn't want anyone else to see it.
The theories are endless, and the lack of transparency only fuels the speculation. I want you to listen to another interview with a woman who was going about her business hiking a trail when she, out of nowhere, ran into someone who was guarding an area.
I have a national park that is fairly close to my home. And this was just a little while back. I was doing some hiking on my own. It was a gorgeous day, and I decided to take this smaller trail that wasn't as crowded. I'd been hiking for maybe an hour when I noticed this side path that wasn't marked on the map. It looked well worn, so I figured it was just an unofficial trail made by other hikers. So I followed it for a while, but before I got too far, this man in a black uniform suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He didn't look like a park ranger, at least not like I've ever seen before. His uniform didn't have any name tags or any park insignias, just plain black. He stopped me and said, "This area is restricted, and you need to turn back around immediately." I was startled and asked, why was it restricted? He just repeated, "You need to turn back." He didn't give me any explanation, no polite tone, just very direct. It wasn't like any rangers I've ever interacted with before, who are usually extremely friendly and willing to answer questions. It was so strange because there weren't any signs or gates that indicated that this was off limits. Why would such a random, unmarked area be restricted? And who was this guy? He didn't look like law enforcement or park staff. I didn't want to argue, so I just turned around and went back to the main trail. But the whole encounter felt off. It made me wonder what could possibly be out there that they don't want people to see.
The woman's story raises so many questions. Who are these people enforcing restrictions? And what are they trying to hide? But she's not the only one to experience something strange. In fact, some of the most unsettling reports don't come from what people see, but from what they hear. I recently received an email from someone who was hiking in Shenandoah National Park. He said he heard a noise unlike anything he'd ever encountered before. It wasn't an animal sound. It was more like a low, steady humming, almost mechanical. Luckily, he managed to record it on his phone. As you'll hear in the clip, the sound plays in the background as he's walking through the woods. I'll play the clip twice, and then again slowed down so you can hear it more clearly.
What is that sound? What is that sound? What is that sound?
It's eerie, isn't it? The hiker said he couldn't tell where the noise was coming from, but it seemed to resonate all around him, almost like it was coming from the ground or the air itself. After hearing it for a few minutes, he said he started to feel uneasy, like he was being watched, and decided to turn back. What could produce a sound like that in the middle of the woods? Is it connected to something natural, or could it be tied to the mysterious activity reported in other national parks? I would love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments. These first-hand accounts give us a glimpse into the strange activity surrounding these forbidden zones. But the stories don't end there. I recently received an email from someone who experienced something truly bizarre while hiking in Yosemite National Park. Here's what they wrote. "Hi Donovan, I wanted to share something strange that happened to me while hiking in Yosemite National Park. It was late in the day, close to dusk, and I was heading back to the parking lot on one of the main trails. It was quiet, and I didn't see anyone else around. It felt like I had the whole place to myself. As I rounded a bend in the trail, I noticed two men walking toward me. At first, I thought they were other hikers, but as they got closer, I realized something was off. They weren't dressed like park rangers or hikers. They were in black tactical gear, vests, radios, and what looked like weapons strapped to their sides. One of them stopped me and said, "Hey, where are you coming from?" His tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't exactly friendly either. I told him I was just hiking back to my car, and the other guy asked, "Have you seen anything unusual out here?" I was taken aback by the question and asked what they meant. One of them just said, "If you didn't see anything, don't worry about it." Then the first guy added, "You should stick to the main trail and head out now. It's getting late." I nodded, and they moved past me, heading further down the trail. I glanced back once, and they were talking into their radios, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. I've been to Yosemite a few times, but I've never experienced anything like that before. Who were those men, and why were they asking about unusual activity? The encounter stuck with me because it felt so out of place. Whatever they were doing out there, it didn't seem like something the public was meant to know about. These stories paint a chilling picture of what might be happening in the hidden corners of our national parks. From hikers encountering armed men with no clear explanation, to strange noises that defy logic, and restricted zones guarded with secrecy. It all leaves us with more questions than answers. What are these forbidden zones really hiding? Are they protecting endangered species, conducting classified experiments, or covering up something far more sinister? Whatever the truth may be, it's clear that these areas are shrouded in mystery, and those who stumble too close are met with silence, or worse. As always, I want to thank everyone who shared their experiences with me. If you've had a strange encounter or witnessed something you can't explain, I want to hear your story. You can email me at donovan@dreadsarmy.com, and maybe your account will help us uncover even more about what's really happening in these parks. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.